Okay, hello and welcome to my TED Talk about my Genius Hour. So let's start with what is a Genius Hour? Genius Hour is a time that we set aside to explore something personal or a passion that we have. So we hope to encourage creativity and allow students to really explore something that they're excited about. This is usually a set time allotted in class, so we call it Genius Hour because it could be about an hour. What did I do? I embarked on a journey to explore what a Genius Hour project would look like from beginning to end so that I can learn how to better assess my students and how to help them out during their exploration of their passion. Every good TED Talk starts with a story, so I'm going to give you my story into my Genius Hour. About a little over a year ago, I worked at a bank, and it was one of the major four banks in Canada. And I had a young man come in, and he asked about the overdraft on his account. He was well overdrawn. And while I was explaining to the student the credit and how credit works and how he was overdrawn in his account and owing money, I realized that this wasn't the first person I had encountered that had been sold an overdraft account and had no idea what it was about. He's also not the first student that I have encountered that had no idea anything about credit or how to manage their money properly. And I started getting a little worried, and I was thinking, this is a potential gap in our education system where students are relying on either their parents or their financial institutions to give them the financial literacy and the personal finance aspects they need. Now, this is fine. It's fine to rely on parents, and I believe that it's okay to ask your bank for advice. However, all banks are private companies and they have agendas, as well as parents can't always be relied on to pass on good information. If a parent doesn't have their own good personal finances, then how can they expect to pass that on to their child? Same way, if a parent doesn't eat well or if a parent doesn't exercise, children can fall into the habits of their parents just because that's what they see. So, what did I think? I thought, well, there must be a way that we can incorporate this knowledge into our education system, but I have no idea about it. So, this is where my inquiry question for my Genius Hour came in. And my question is, how can we effectively teach financial literacy to high school students in Ontario? And I wanted to approach this topic from three different ways. One, I want to examine the current financial literacy program and resources that we have available. Two, I want to explore the standards of measuring financial competence. And three, I want to propose changes we can make to fulfill this gap if that exists. So, those are my three things. How did I do it? Number one, I started with exploring Ontario. So, when I looked at Ontario, I looked at many financial resources that we had available to us. The Ontario curriculum does include financial literacy. So there is a document called the Ontario Curriculum for grades 1 to 8 Financial Literacy Resource Guide. And this resource guide includes the ways that financial literacy is incorporated into the already existing curriculum that Ontario offers. So within the disciplines and the subjects taught in the classrooms, how is financial literacy inserted into those disciplines? In secondary school, we see a very similar thing. There's a very similar document, Ontario Curriculum Guide, grade 9 to 12, financial literacy, and it's a resource guide for these schools. It recognizes that all subjects are somehow linked to the development and knowledge of financial literacy, and some are more closely than others, including mathematics and language. It's supposed to help teachers find the opportunities to emphasize the responsible financial choices. Now, I decided to dig even deeper into our curriculum, and I discovered that the courses offered in Ontario high schools are not that great when it comes to personal finance. There is a course called Mathematics for Work and Everyday Life. This is an open course that is offered to all students, and when I checked with my local high school, it actually is available. So, this course is called Mathematics for Work and Everyday Life. I don't know if that sets off alarm bells to you, but it sets off alarm bells to me. Number one, it's called mathematics. When children and students hear mathematics, they generally tend to shy away from these things. So I think it's inappropriately named course. Number two, it's an optional course. So it's a grade 11 and grade 12 course that is optional. When most students are in grade 11 and grade 12, one, they're looking for a course that isn't math, that is easy for them, because they are trying to do something that isn't difficult. And two, these students aren't focused on that. The students are focused on the courses that are necessary for them to get their Ontario Secondary School diploma and for them to get acceptance into university. So I don't believe that it's appropriate to include this course as an optional course. There are some other courses that are offered, but they aren't universally offered everywhere. So they exist, but they are no longer universally offered. What is surprising is that many courses are offered in business, economics, and accounting as a choice to the high school students. But none of these courses actually deal with personal finance. They only deal with corporate finance, or they deal with finances that you're going to be doing for other people and other companies, and nothing to do with the person's self. And even careers has job choices, looking at personality types to see what kind of job would suit you best, but it has nothing to do with actually getting a job, doing your taxes for your salary, nothing to do with that. So it seems Ontario is satisfied with this kind of approach to financial literacy. And with that, they have tons and tons of resources that come with it. However, we all know that resources are ineffective unless they're actually being used, and they're actually being used properly. So what I wanted to do was I wanted to take a look at just how some other countries and how other provinces may deal with financial literacy. Really quickly, I took a look into British Columbia and saw that they do have a national report card on financial literacy, and it is an important part of their education system. Canada-wide, they do have a national strategy for financial literacy, which means that Canada recognizes this as important and wishes to spread it amongst all its provinces as something to incorporate in their curriculums. If we look across the sea and we go into Europe, one thing that stuck out to me was Finland actually has a federation of Finnish financial services, and it's an organization that actively pursues the continued presence of financial education in a student's life. So it's important to the Finnish population to continuously enforce financial literacy. Lastly, I looked at Europe as a whole, and there is a giant document called Eurofina's e-publication on financial education. And this document, like I said, is a giant document, but it does do a lot of reporting about the importance of financial education in a student's life, continued throughout their life. So not just offered one time, but continuously. This is on par with the Ontario curriculum. This is what the Ontario curriculum wants, a continued presence of financial literacy throughout a student's lifetime and career. So what's next? Next, we need to learn out ways that we can measure this, because if we can't measure financial literacy, then how are we supposed to see if our tools are being effective? Canada does have a tool for assessing financial literacy, and this is amongst the adult population. So in 2009, Stats Canada did administer the Canadian Financial Capability Survey. This survey covered key topics such as investments and budgeting. This was, like I said, only for adults. I needed to look further, and I did. I went to Europe, and in Europe, they did a study. The study was done by Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, which is a multinational organization. The study looks at how participants who were 18 and over answered a financial literacy core questionnaire. Canada wasn't included in this, but what this showed me was that a tool to measure financial literacy exists, and it exists in a proper research context. I then discovered that the same organization, the OECD, has an almost identical study and a questionnaire, but this one is for students. So, since Canada only offered its questionnaire to adults, I believe that there's a gap to be filled. This questionnaire has been proven to be effective in trying to analyze the financial situations in these other countries by the OECD, and I believe that going forward, we should try to use a tool like this in our own province and in our own country. So because of these findings, I would like to propose my final project, the final thing that I believe. And so how can we effectively teach financial literacy to Ontario high school students? My Genius Hour researching times have led me to 3 major suggestions. Number 1, I believe the questionnaire that we talked about, which is offered by PISA, should be applied to a study in Ontario, if not Canada-wide. We need to assess our students' current financial literacy knowledge and then reassess to see if what we do is making a difference. Number two, we need to continue to make changes to the curriculum that are in line with the Task Force for Financial Literacy's recommendation. Canada did have a task force that made recommendations on financial literacy. These recommendations were based off of research of interviews done with students about what they wish to learn more about. There is a lot of good stuff in this. However, there was no assessment of the current knowledge. Number three, I believe that we need to make changes in the way we assess financial literacy. I believe that in elementary school, there should be a section on the report card that recognizes financial literacy as an important competency in our curriculum. I think it's wonderful that it's spread out between many different things, but can the teacher properly assess financial literacy in the classroom, and are the students understanding that? I also believe in high school there needs to be a mandatory half credit at least. We have careers, we have civics, those are two great little half credits that are in there. We should also have this half credit in what I think should be called personal finance. And this course needs to deal with four major things that I think Canadian students and Ontario students are missing. And I believe they should look at budgeting according to someone's salary or according to what they're making hourly minimum wage. I believe that it should look at taxes, how students can file their own taxes now and how they will be able to file their own taxes. I believe it should look over credit. What is it like to build credit? What is having a credit card? What are interest rates? And lastly, I believe it should look at mortgage, renting, and investing. And it doesn't have to go in depth, but it should look at the benefits of mortgaging, the benefits of investing, and perhaps the benefits of renting, and when is it right to rent, and when is it right to have a mortgage, well, depending on your age, depending on your salary, and depending on your life situation. So those are the three major things that I definitely am proposing as my Genius Hour project solution. And overall, I would say that looking at the Genius Hour, it's difficult. It's not easy. I think educators need to focus their students. So I was very passionate about this topic, but it didn't mean that I was diligently looking up these things all the time. When I did actually use that time, I used it so effectively. I kept researching and researching and researching. I found more documents and more information than I could ever use. So that's a very positive thing, I think, is that if you can get the kids focused, they will love it because it's a passion of theirs. I also believe that finding a way to express a final product could be difficult. So my final product changed from beginning to end. I had an idea that I would be creating this course for students that would somehow make it better. And in the end, I realized that there are so many things that potentially need to be done before we can even introduce a course. Especially, how can we even assess if the financial literacy is low or if it's actually where it needs to be. So this is my TED Talk on Genius Hour. I think it's a wonderful thing that we can use for our students if we can assess it properly and if you implement it with proper supervision to make sure that students are staying on task. So yeah, thanks for watching.